Okay, Greg, you are live on YouTube.
I'm live. Yeah. Just a few more seconds, Ruben. Oh, Robin, I see you're there. Hi.
No problem, Greg.
Natalie. Yeah, we can see you. We can see your chat box, Rob. Good. And Okay, Mr. Rubin, whenever you're ready.
Okay, Greg, hang tight.
Welcome, everyone. It's 6:10 on Monday night.
Greg,
You're listening
Greg,
to... I'm sorry, we're not ready?
I said hold tight.
Oh, you said hold tight? I thought you said go. Oh, well, practice makes perfect.
Exactly. And now you may go, Greg.
Welcome, everyone. It's 6:11 on Monday night, and you're listening to the 240th installment of the Age Out Angels Radio Hour, right here on www.hamiltonradio.net Channel 2. I'm your host, Greg Rapport. If you're new to the show, I'm the founder and executive director of Age Out Angels. We provide one-to-one mentors to vulnerable youth for the purpose of coordinating the care and services that they need to thrive. We try to help young people avoid some of the horrible pitfalls that they're likely to face when they don't have a proper safety net. And this program is brought to you every week at the same time, courtesy of all the fine people here at Hamilton Radio who allow us to use this airtime. Robin is producing tonight. Barely made it into the studio, but she made it. Ruben is on the big board. So good to have both of you with me as always, and so good to have all of you listening. From your computers at home, in your cars in New Jersey, around the country, and even beyond. Someone from Ukraine sent me a message the other day. Now, please take a moment. If you're looking at us on Facebook or YouTube, I need you to hit all the buttons for me, okay? I never thought that this part would be possible because, honestly, YouTube is something that I think of more like an archive. I think of the show as broadcasting on Hamilton Radio, and that's where it gets the majority, of its audience. So I store the shows in the YouTube archive, thinking that one day I'll cut them all together and make, 5 great shows. But our subscribership has been growing on the YouTube side. And by growing, I mean, we're up to like 75, I think now, which is small, but kind of amazing. I thought it would just be my 10 relatives, who would be looking at those things. So God bless you. Somebody's doing this. Somebody's out there and you're sharing it and you're hit the subscribe button. And you know what? That's the only way we can spread this information. Nobody's going to be talking about what we're talking about tonight. That's the truth. And it's also the truth that it affects everyone, everywhere, wherever you are. What we're talking about tonight matters to you and people you care about. So please, please, please share this with everyone you know. Tonight, we're going to take a nice, interesting view at education from a point of view that perhaps you hadn't considered in the past. We hear a lot about education. We hear from like national professionals on education, but my guest tonight, NATALIE Tung, is the co-founder and executive director of an organization called HomeWorks Trenton, and NATALIE and I have been in the trenches here in education for the last few years, and so the stories and the lens that you're going to see this from tonight is going to be unique. It's going to be something you never imagined. And we may be joined by a couple of other people from the National Foster Alumni Association might be joining us in a bit. That's possible. Ruben, if they try to get in, please let them in. If they're in your waiting room,
Will do.
Don't hold them back. Okay? All right. Now, NATALIE was on our show, 2-3 years ago, maybe.
Yes.
Right? Welcome back. How have you been?
Yeah, hi Greg. It's great to see you again after, I think it was definitely before the pandemic since I've last spoken to you and seen you. And so just want to say thank you so much for inviting me back onto your show today. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. I always learn so much in every single conversation. So
when we spoke before, you were really just sort of starting HomeWorks, right?
Yeah, I think I must have been still in college then. I think
1 year in.
1 year. Okay.
1 year in. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And you are ridiculously young to be doing this sort of thing and starting and running a whole organization. But let's not keep the audience in suspense. Just give them a view of what HomeWorks does.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. So I guess just to give you a little bit of a sense of homeworks and who we are, what our model is, we are essentially replicating the boarding school experience and bringing it to public schools and making it accessible. So really what that looks like is from Sunday nights to Friday mornings, our kids, and specifically we work with girls in marginalized communities who are attending high school. And we are starting here in Trenton, New Jersey. But so our girls, our scholars, stay overnight from Sunday nights to Friday mornings, and they're dropped off, with by grandma, parents, whoever, and they get dropped off on Sundays. We have group therapy, we have kind of house fun activities, and then we take them to school every single morning. And then, and that is really to ensure that, to combat the chronic absenteeism rate that we are currently fighting within, Trenton and within this country. But also beyond that, we want to make sure that they're not only at school, but that they're early, on time. They're there for breakfast. They're there getting ready and having, a clear head before they start the day. We then pick them up after school, and then they come home to do programming with us. On Mondays, it's academics. On Tuesdays, it's identity-driven leadership. Wednesdays is wellness Wednesdays. And then Thursdays are field trips. We then have a family-style meal. Everyone eats together, laugh, talk about their day. And then after dinner, we have study hall and tutoring. So we have one-on-one tutoring with group tutoring. And then they stay overnight. We have lights out. And then they stay throughout the week and then go home on the weekends to hang out with their families.
I'm just going to back up that whole process because I want people to really feel it. Okay, you started this for a reason. You didn't just want to have a lot of kids staying over from Sunday to Friday because you were lonely. You had a reason. And I got to tell you something. Let me preface it this way. Okay, I'll preface it from the negative that I see. I see a lot of people, in fact, all the people that I come in contact with who have graduated high school are in for a very rude awakening when they go out and try to get a job or go into the military because no one trusts high school anymore. They all give a placement test. Everyone does. If you want to make more than minimum wage, you have to pass a placement test. And on that placement test, it's called a CASIS or a TABE or an AccuPlacer, but they're all the same. And you have to score a 10th grade equivalent or you can't be in the military, or you can't get career training. So I mean, I've made jokes like you graduated high school. That's great. So then you go to a college admissions officer and you hand him your diploma and he blows his nose with it because you're still going to take the AccuPlacer. Your high school diploma doesn't mean anything. Now, that gap, I'm like praying can be made up by an organization like Homeworks.
Yeah, no, I think I appreciate you giving us this platform because I think something that we think a lot about is, and I think this is, we think a lot about, how do we really ultimately address this huge challenge, not only within Trenton, but also within the US and within the world of making sure that ultimately all of our scholars are able to, and all girls around the world, all people around the world are able to come out of, high school, come out of, wherever, and be on this journey where not only do they feel confident with themselves and know themselves, and are grounded within their identity as people, but then being able to also have, from all of their kind of learning journeys and experiences, being able to ultimately have agency, to have economic freedom and power, and then ultimately to make change within the world. And so I think that's something that we think deeply about. And a lot, how we started Homeworks was really based on my own personal experiences of, I grew up in Hong Kong, and although I was lucky to have a lot of different resources and access to different education systems growing up, one of the education systems that I was in for a few years, it was kind of like a local school in Hong Kong is what we called it. And it was not only was I an English learner in a Chinese speaking school, so the language kind of barrier was a little challenging, but I was also learning in a very numbers driven system. So it was all about memorization. It was all about copying, memorizing, and it was very grounded in test scores. And I think with that system, I didn't do very well. My confidence was kind of rock bottom. I didn't test well at all. And it wasn't until, I had the opportunity to come over to the US, and I ended up having this amazing opportunity to go to a boarding school here in New Jersey, where for the first time, and I know it's rare, it's still very rare, where you basically are learning in a classroom of just like 12 people around the table, and the teacher is there and almost as your equal, where you're having conversations and thinking about thinking, learning how to think, learning how to learn, rather than like learning the product. And I think as a result, I started to learn a lot about myself and the world around me. And that's what started driving me to learn. It was no longer about like getting a test score or memorizing, but it was about, wow, like I'm reading this book to learn about someone across the world. And thereby then I was able to learn about myself and who I was, as a person, or who I'm becoming as a person. And then through that, I'm more motivated to like, close read and like analyze this text and think about all these themes and write my essays and read. And so it was just such a powerful experience. And I wanted to make that experience accessible to every single girl in this world. And I know just one last thing, but the benefits of boarding, I think, especially because of all the systemic injustices within this country, within Trenton, within the world. And, I think that kind of structure and stability is not a given for everyone. And so that boarding experience, especially throughout the week, we were thinking like that's kind of a plus, where our scholars can really be in this environment where we're working with their guardians, their parents, to create this environment together. But ultimately, like, our scholars are able to then just focus on themselves, on their academics, and growing as people and growing into who they are, whoever they choose to become. And that's, I think, what what makes us different, what makes our model special at Homeworks.
Absolutely, absolutely true. And I find that students, when they try to do their education better, because they've come out of high school with a diploma but don't have the skills, are very distracted by all the things in their world. They're a little bit older, they have to make a living, they have to start to work a little bit, things like that, those distractions. When you take those distractions away, what you're doing is leveling the playing field. Because yes. I will tell you that my children grew up without those distractions. They grew up without those distractions. They had SAT tutors in the library after school. That's the playing field. That's the competitive environment that these children face. And that's what you're doing, is you're leveling that playing field. You're removing the distractions, allowing them to focus on what they need to focus on, and also at the same time occupying a good portion of their time so that they don't have a whole lot of what's commonly referred to as devil's playthings.
Yeah, and I think. Oh, sorry, Greg. Did not mean to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. I just, I can feel how that works. And actually, over time, do they stay with you like year after year until they graduate?
So the goal, when I first met you, I think we were just probably a summer pilot at that point. Mm-hmm. And we grew into a semester pilot and then a year-long pilot. And now this is our second year doing it. We're 2 out of 4 years. So we're now making sure that we're not just doing kind of like shorter pilots, but we're doing 4 years of high school, like all 4 years of high school for a single scholar. So they go through all 4 years with us.
So if somebody comes to you with not able to understand the joy of learning, after 4 years, you'll rewire their priorities.
Yeah, definitely. I think something that I wanted to add to it too was, yes, we have the boarding school structure, we have that model, but beyond that, I think the kind of two other things that we're doing, I think a little differently than boarding schools is number one, we're really focusing on our pillars of academics and identity-driven leadership. And so everything that we're doing right now, like, our kids not only have that structure, but their academics. So on Mondays, just this afternoon, I think they're still there. Actually, they went on a college tour at Princeton and actually took a politics class with Princeton students and are discussing politics with other, college students. They're learning coding. They're learning poetry writing from, last year they learned poetry writing from an adjunct professor at Kane University. They are learning about finance and investment, and then identity-driven leadership. They're all about honing into who they are and thinking about them as, what does it mean specifically in Trenton? Our girls are Black and brown. So what does it mean to be a Black or brown girl in Trenton, New Jersey, and how can I make change? So they're have curriculum on thinking about what is colorism, body image, self-love, school to prison pipeline, all these different topics that are, ultimately allowing them to have the language to be able to feel equipped to take on the world and become a leader within this world.
Yeah. Yes. There's all I could do is echo it. That is just such a nice thing. And I think the young ladies who are involved with your program must know how lucky they are for getting that kind of opportunity. Now, in just a second, I want to introduce April Curtis if she'll come back. And there you are. Hi, April. April is from the Foster Care Alumni of America. Are you the board chair of that?
I am.
You're the chairperson of that. Wow. So, the assumption there is that you have lived experience, yes?
That is a true assumption. It's accurate.
Would you care to reveal?
Sure, no problem. My name is April Curtis, and I'm from Chicago, Illinois. And Foster Care Alumni of America was founded in 2004. And so we're 19 years old. And it was founded by a group of former youth and care allies. And so for myself, I had spent 18 years in the Illinois child welfare system. So I aged out of the Illinois child welfare system at 21. And so it was an opportunity. At that time, I was a youth advisory board member, active youth advisory board member, providing advocacy with other young adults that were wanting to make a change within the Illinois child welfare system. And so around that time, there really wasn't much after Youth Advisory Board for individuals like myself to continue to engage unless you went straight into college and continued on the pathway. While I was in college, myself and other advocates across the United States of America and the territories came together with Casey Family Programs, the support of Casey Family Programs, which was what we called the Better Together Summit, which was under the leadership at that time, Misty Stensley, who also was an alumni and wanted to just give voice, choice, and advocacy to ensure there was nothing about us without us. And for the last 19 years, that is what FCA has continued to be, nothing about us without us.
Well, the thing about foster care that always struck me is that you have people who are willing to give children in foster care a voice and a seat at the table, not realizing that they already own the table. It's your table. I notice an accent in your voice. Are you American born?
I am.
From where?
But I'm from Chicago. But my family is Puerto Rican. And so yeah.
Okay. All right. That's fine. So Sox or Cubs?
Cubs.
Very good. Okay. You can stay. So we're talking about education. Oh, you actually wanted to talk a little bit about the Thanksgiving dinner. Did you just have it?
Yeah. So in Illinois.
So what is that Thanksgiving dinner?
Yeah, so in 2007, many alumni, so I have the capital back there, we went home for the holidays. And so as advocates, what we wanted to do is create a movement around and continue to bring awareness around bringing kids home for the holidays and what that truly means for young people that are either in group homes, residentials, that are not home for the holidays and that they're not sharing with true family members, whether it's in foster care or traditional living, but they're not home for the holidays. And so what we did was we went home for the holidays. And in 2007, we had a traditional Thanksgiving dinner right on the front lawn of the state capitol, of the US Capitol. And so after that, each of the leaders that were there, Shalita, Lupe, Chauncey, Aaron, Lisa, the different people in support that were also alumni from across the United States, they went home and began to do their own versions of Thanksgiving holidays. And so in Illinois, when we had developed the Illinois chapter for FCAA, because FCAA is a chapter organization, what we did in Illinois was I started out of my home doing the Thanksgiving dinners until, but it was really with the idea to just give those like myself a place to have Thanksgiving dinner who didn't have anywhere to go, to just have a sense of community, and those who have aged out of child welfare. What it became over the years was when James McIntyre, Jeremy, when Antoine and individuals in Illinois, other alumni as well, became a part of it. We started to bring in providers and host it at organizations. And that allowed us as alumni to serve current young people in care, so that the young people in care got to see alumni who were making it, who were successful, who were in the pathway, and they got to see someone within themselves. What it also did for us was to provide culturally relevant food. So for me, growing up in care in certain homes, I didn't have Puerto Rican food. There wasn't dishes that were at the tables that I was at. So it was important that if we are serving in a group home facility, that we're providing that. Same thing if we're providing mac and cheese, the staples, right, that are tradition, or tamales, or whether it's the different foods that we wanted to bring for tasting. And so we've been doing this since 2007, and we just had our last one. And one of our partners, Lawrence Hall in Chicago, is an amazing partner. They have been co-hosting with us. And so the young people we get to see, so we're getting older, but we're also seeing younger and younger people in facilities. And so for us, it's important to connect the dots for them, that there is a pathway. There was a young person that came, and they were no longer in the system, and it was intentional for speaking up afterwards to myself and another alumni that does this, and said this was cathartic for her and healing, that she got to come back to a place that she was living in as in a residential at a time in which may have seemed like upsetting, but when she reflected, it became a very healing place. And so now she has a different lens to be able to come back to.
Interesting. I'm actually doing a holiday Zoom and so I don't buy them dinner, right? But I send them $50 in their Cash App, and so at least they get a Christmas present,
Yeah.
And if they get two, that's all right. I always, whenever you hear of someone who doesn't have much being given something, there's always somebody standing back there to ruin it and say, oh no, he got two, or he doesn't need that, he gets something else. No, it's okay. It's Christmas. If you have time to be on my Zoom, then you have time and you deserve to have a present. That's kind of how I feel about that. But I wanted to ask you to look back on your education. And April, you're an exception. You know that. You graduated college?
I did.
You're a 3%er.
I was just telling a young person that today. That they are a 3%er.
That's right. You get the leather jacket with the patch. 3%. So you're the exception. So when you look back on school, can you just sort of reflect on that, especially in your younger years and into those awkward teen years, of what your relationship with school was like? Did you move a lot? That sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's why important the whole Home for Holidays and our advocacy, what we do with FCAA. So we have legislative shadow days, because when we think about our experiences, whether it's in the educational systems or in multiple homes or multiple moves, what is the center of what kept us grounding, what kept us going? For me, education was my safe haven. I knew that no matter what placement I was going to go to, no matter what court date, that I was always going to be able to show up to school. And I was always going to have the same consistency of I was going to get an education that nobody could take from me.
Okay.
They can't take it away from me, right? They could take my placement. They could take my relatives, because that mindset, right? You know, I'm a teenager, I'm a young person, and I entered into care at age 3. So that means that I've gone through multiple moves and multiple relative placements. And so for me, having my education and having access to education was the most saving grace for me. Although when I went away to college, I was homeless. I still was excited about the opportunity that I got to go away, right, to a campus. But nobody thought about what happens when there's nowhere to go once the school shuts down. Unfortunately, that still happens to young people in different states now, right? So I went to college back in 1998, and there's still young people today that I talk to that they're still dealing with facing homelessness while away, choosing to go away to college. And so ensuring what pathway you're taking and what, you know, what's needed for you. For me, I was my siblings' tutor because of the multiple moves. And so being able to ensure that they had stability in their education. And for me, it was staying grounded in all the activities. I made sure I signed up for everything because I wanted to keep busy, and I wanted to be a part of a community that, again, nobody could take away from me. So moving so much, you don't really get a community base or a community feel or a familial feel. You get that through education.
So you created for yourself what NATALIE offers to people is a chance to have that safe haven. That place you come to from Sunday to Friday where you don't have to deal with all the other things. You're good here. You can learn to appreciate learning. I don't know. Did I do that okay, NATALIE? Or are you thinking, oh, come on, Greg, stop that?
Yeah, no, I think first of all, April, it's so great to meet you. Thank you for sharing your story. And it's amazing. You know, I think what I really related to is like the notion of two things, but the first is I think the fact that, you know, what you're all doing at FCAA is that you're finding people who like you know, your youth and, you know, we call our scholars, but, you know, your youth can really see themselves in, because when they can see themselves in their mentors and their leaders, they know this is possible, and they know they have so much potential to do whatever they want to do. But when they see it, they then believe it themselves. And I think that is something that really, I think, resonated with me when you're talking, as well as, you know, I think it might be a little bit different in how we're doing this, but you use the word, I think, like with the Thanksgiving dinner, like going home and bringing them home. And for us, our program at Homeworks, the whole reason why we're not doing a boarding school or creating another school system is for us, we want to stay within our home communities. And so right now we started in Trenton, and the goal is not to like create this boarding school where our kids have to leave Trenton to feel like they have to be successful, but that they're really, you know, here and they can go to their local public schools, and then and be here within the community, be here with, you know, family and friends, and know that they can still be successful being in this amazing city, because there's so much to offer here in Trenton. And so we're reversing that narrative where kids feel like they need to leave to be successful. But I think something else that I just popped into my mind, Greg, is right now we just purchased our own home in Trenton, and it's a dilapidated building. So it's, you know, it's under an acre big. It will be big enough for 42 scholars. It is, as our architect, Josh Zinder says, it's in need of a lot of love. So it's not move-in ready yet, but we are raising $3 million right now to renovate it and to get it ready. And the goal for us the dream, we know we will get there. Our North Star is to have chapters of homeworks all around the country, all around the world, where we have girls coming together, living in our homeworks communities, not only, growing as individual humans and ultimately achieving that economic freedom, but also just as importantly, to be leaders within their communities and create systemic change.
Yeah.
So,
It's-
maybe one day, April, we'll come over to you all in Chicago and start a chapter there.
Oh, be sure to stop at the art museum in Chicago. It's one of my favorite places in the world. So when we think of the sheer numbers, I think, Natalie, you really underscored an important point. I mean, you've been at this now for what, 5 years or so. And before that in your college prep, and that was all leading up to this. So, and finally, you're at a place where if you raise the right 3 mil, you can house 42 girls. And okay, so there's maybe 150, 200,000 girls who could use this sort of educational environment. And ladies and gentlemen who are listening to this, Natalie can't do this alone. Okay.
Yeah.
She just can't. It's just too big. Although, Natalie, if anyone could, it would be you, I believe.
It takes a village.
But it really does. It really does. I mean, that's what blows me away. How many, do you know, April, unmute yourself. How many members do you have in Foster Care Alumni of America?
So in Foster Care Alumni of America, we have last time I looked, it was about 7,000 members.
Right.
And so those range between 18 to 65. And so it is, and the membership, it's really, right now we're doing a whole Giving Tuesday campaign, but it's really about being able to sponsor our advocacy days, which is our legislative shadow days that we've always done in the different states and oftentimes in DC. But like, for example, in Illinois, we bring young people that are currently in care and who have been in foster care and group home care and traditional system care to our state capital to shadow with legislators to educate them around the needs of young people that are still in care to advocate. And so we use the combination of those that are currently in care along with those who have left to be able to provide the strengthening and voice. And so part of that, it doesn't get funded all by itself. So we definitely use the donations to be able to support bringing young people to the capital. We also use donations for our traditional Thanksgiving dinners that we do in other states as well. There are state chapters that they use the support as well. In Illinois, we have a very robust support system. In some states, it's not as robust, but because we're more grounded in Illinois, but we definitely have alumni reunions, which is in the summertime, which is our own versions of summer gatherings. And so it's bringing people together. And we use the service providers as like the aunts and uncles when you think of a traditional alumni, family reunion. And you like, who do you go to talk to, right? So go talk to your auntie over there, or go talk to granny over there. But what we do when we do our alumni reunions or our foster walks is we bring out providers from the community where young people and adults that they need, whether it's job resource, housing resource, education resources. And so we use it around food. And so they get to be able to walk through the different providers as well. And bring their families.
I mean, what struck me about the 7,000 is just like, think about the sheer numbers that are needed to accomplish a large goal. And so if every single one of your members, if all 7,000 of your members were to mentor one foster child, they wouldn't scratch the surface of the need. It's just remarkable how the sheer numbers have grown, to that point. And I got to tell you, man, April, you're the exception. The kids I meet hate school, would rather die or kill someone else or run away, than go to school. And I wonder, Natalie, I get, what I feel I get? I feel I get a lot of B and C students. I don't get a lot of like kids who would be considered the A student in the high school. And I've always thought that a C student could fall either way. You know, if the emphasis is there to drag him down, that C student could easily become a dropout. And if the impetus is there to lift him up, then that C student could become a B and an A student at that point. Like in the middle, you could fall either way. Just curious if you have a
Yeah. April, I'm curious to hear what you think too, but I think, just in working again, I'm, very much on a learning journey here. I learn from our scholars every day, but just from what I have seen, I know, every one of our scholars, every one of my students in Trenton, they all are so capable. They're all capable. They all have so much potential. And it's really like, I think figuring out, and I think this goes back to the theme of education of like, how do you unlock that interest? How do you unlock that passion within every single scholar? And when there are so many intersectional factors that are going on outside of school, it is, I think just I don't think I could have done, like, there's just, it's impossible to then have your head in school and focus on, on reading, learning, all of that, when there's all these intersectional factors on not only like basic needs, but also just on identity and thinking about like, who am I as you're kind of growing into your teenage years, who am I in this world, and all the different things that comes with being a teenager. And I think education, I think we're educators, we're all evolving and learning, is like, how do you really unlock that? And to me, and the reason why we're doing everything that we're doing at Homeworks, especially with our identity-driven leadership pillar, is that it starts by rooting education and learning on like who you are, starting by who you are. So me as an Asian American woman, Korean, Chinese, grew up in Hong Kong, came here, like I'm starting there as me, and then being able to like use that to ground myself in that learning was what helped me, unlock it and be interested in, and, be able to thrive within an education space. And I think we need to be doing more of that work. And April used the term being culturally responsive, being culturally relevant. I think that is super, super important to have a scholar go from a C to an A. One last thing I will say, we had a scholar who I think their GPA was at a 1.8, and within just 1 year, they were at Homeworks, they got up to a 2.7. And when I asked this scholar, hey, like, what do you think, like, how did you get from there to, that's incredible, that gap to like go from one, that's a whole grade point average. They were basically saying, well, it was cool to be, study hall. I looked at everyone around me. It was cool to like learn, and it was cool to, to work hard and to do all this stuff. And so I just did it. And so I think that story, I share this because it just shows this scholar is so capable, just like every scholar. And it's just, how do you unlock that so that then their full kind of being comes out within the learning environment?
That's right. She sees that 2.7 and she might be thinking, that's awfully close to 3. I wonder if I could get that. The goals sort of kick in. But April, when you were growing up, I mean, you were in the system for a long, long time. And like we understand you were the exception, but you must have been housed with other kids who had different relationship with school than you did.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is just people and understanding, like, what are we meeting their needs, right? And so you can't focus on education if you're worried about where your next placement is going to be. You can't focus on education if you're worried about your parents. You can't focus on your education if you're worried about your stability or your next meal. Any of those things, that your whole protective factors, if your needs are not met, then at the end of the day, there's nothing you can tell me that's going to say, let's focus on education.
That bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If you don't have something in that bottom rung to keep you stable, it's hard.
Yeah.
If not impossible.
And I think the thing is that it all depends, right? And that's why, like, I appreciate that there are still programs out there that allow that when someone feels that they have created that safety net for themselves, maybe it's 21 or 22 that they have chosen to go back to school, or they've chosen, right, to self-regulate or to receive the services that allows them to see the end of, okay, school is for me. And school is not for everybody. And that's also part of, like, just understanding that, right? There's the trade school that people are not, pushing as much as they used to, but it's definitely, if you have a young person who is more active with their hands, or they can be an engineer, or they can be a construction worker, like, why not give them that pathway and provide those tools in that school set? But they still need support and tutoring. They still need mentoring to be able to create that pathway for them. So career readiness programs are really important. I think for me, I want to highlight that while I may have had multiple moves and been separated from my family, what was consistent was that along the way, no matter where I was in my educational pathway, that there was somebody there that mirrored a mentor for me. So whether I called it out or saw them as a mentor, they were mentor-ish to me. And so it was ensuring that my education was at the forefront of whatever I was doing. Never give up on your education. Never give up on what you're doing. And it allowed, even for me at 18, to choose my advocacy pathway in supporting for education rights and responsibilities as well.
So let's talk about a couple of requirement type things, and I'll ask both of you the same question. But Natalie, since you're running the operation right now, let me start with
every scholar. I think when scholars feel safe, I think when scholars have the education, like, are equipped with the tools and learn about, the effects of, all these things, I think they can then are equipped to make the right choices. And so for us, we do not drug test our scholars. What we do is have group counseling sessions where our scholars learn about the effects of drugs, where they learn about healthy coping skills, where they learn about self-regulating and, all these different things. And so that's what we focus on.
Cool. How about you, April? What's your feeling about things like drug testing and all that?
I don't think that it's a part of, like, working with young people. In my everyday job, so I'm a chief of staff at Youth Guidance, and we have within our programs, we have a program specifically called Project Strive, and that works with young people that are in with the child welfare system, and they get a one-on-one mentor or counseling. And we don't say you can't get services because you don't pass a drug test or any of those things. Where there's education pathways. But there isn't a shaming. We're also a state that, passed, marijuana, those type of laws. But at the same time, it is ensuring that you're meeting young people where they are, and safety first, right? One thing, when I ran youth programs for the last 20 plus years, and I would always tell my young people, like, okay, just because what you do outside doesn't mean that you get to bring that inside. Like, those are the real heart-to-heart conversations that you have, but then also do education a part of it as well.
Very good. Now, Natalie, how do people get into your program?
So right now we recruit from all of the middle schools in Trenton. So we work with Trenton school teachers and counselors in 8th grade and 9th grade, and they nominate scholars. Some scholars also just find us through social media, or we're at a lot of community kind of fairs and kind of gatherings, or they hear from their friends or family members. And so that's how we get those applications. Once we get the applications, we have our families and scholars go through a written application, an interview process, recommendations, and go through group interviews. And then that's how we form our community. We're very intentional with who we bring in based on, who we think is ready to be, in this environment, to be, ready to tackle this challenge of self-growth and community growth at that moment in time.
And how can people find you on the web? Because I have a feeling that after hearing you tonight, people all across the country are going to be inspired to want to do this, because it's too cool. So
our website is www.homeworkstrenton.org. So homeworks with an S, Trenton.org. And I know April talked about Giving Tuesday, but very quickly, Giving Tuesday is tomorrow. So I hope you donate to both of our organizations. And with Homeworks, we are actually doing a challenge fund, Giving Tuesday challenge, where if we get 125 donors, we will unlock $25,000 more dollars. And so, any amount counts towards that 125 donors. So I really hope that you all check us out and also donate to FCAA as well.
And yes, so April, how do people learn more about your organization?
Well, thank you, Natalie, for the plug, and thank you, Greg. And yes, please donate to both organizations. And for us, you just go to our website, fostercarealumni.org. We're also on social media, Facebook, Instagram. I am not the person that we are Foster Care Alumni of America. I absolutely love our social media person, Kelsey. She's the best. But definitely look us up on fostercarealumni.org, and you can link on whether you are someone who was touched by the child welfare system or an ally. So even if you don't have foster care or child welfare experience that you grew up, but you want to be an ally to support the cause, you can become a member too as well. There are for the younger members, we don't charge to be a part of the community. There are individuals like myself that as we get older, we can give back, and $20 for membership for the whole annual year. You get a newsletter, you get access to advocacy, you find out what we're doing, and then you get invited to our events as well, but then hear about the different things that are going on as well. So you can become an ally as well to support the cause.
Absolutely spectacular. Now, ladies, we have a minute, and I would like to go over with you some current trendings in education. I'm laughing because I started in education in 1975. You cannot imagine how many current trendings I've heard over the years. We're going to make everything better. In the early 70s, there was this thing called thorough and efficient. That was going to make the education system work. And of course, No Child Left Behind was just a euphemism for let's leave as many children behind as we can. So now, something I learned about just today, I never knew it was called this. Tell me if you guys are familiar with this. This is called Maker Learning Initiatives. Maker Learning. I had no idea what it was. It's I don't know why they called it this. It's when you have a child who isn't learning, and to unlock that passion, as Natalie describes, to unlock that passion, you put them on something that they're truly interested in and have them learn through that. So in other words, the child is determining sort of the general path, and then the teacher has to guide them through that. Another thing that I've actually experienced personally is moving away from a letter grade system. My first year in college, I went to a school that was in its second year in New Jersey called Stockton State College. And they changed the letter grade system just to be cool. They thought, now we're going to be cool. We're talking 1972. They changed it to HSN. H stood for high, S stood for satisfactory, N stood for no credit. How the hell are you going to transfer that? What's your GPA? It was so worthless. Unless everyone adopts it, then no one knows how to assimilate it into the patterns that they're used to judging by. So I don't know about the letter grade system. I really have some issues about that. Changing classroom approaches like flipped learning. You familiar with flipped learning? Anybody want to say something about it? Everybody's muted suddenly.
Yeah, I don't know if I tried this in my classroom, but flipped learning is basically where rather than learning the material and then doing homework, from my understanding, April, let me know if I'm correct, you flip it so that kids are doing it at home, and then in their classroom during the day, they're then doing those activities.
Yes. That's it. They get some things, so maybe a video or whatever to look at to stimulate the, the topic, and then you get into class and then you talk about that. Exactly. So you got that going on. Now, this is something April hit on, the institution of micro-credentials. Micro-credentials meaning, maybe you don't have to go to 4 years of college to get a certificate to do this particular job so you can start earning. Because that's always a thing, right? Well, not in high school, but when they're 19, 20, 21 years old, and now they age out at 21, not 18 in New Jersey. Could be different in other states. But when you're that age, I mean, you can't not work. That has to be a part of your thing. In 19, 20, a lot of the young girls already have the kid. I have one student who's 22 years old. She's 24 now. I met her when she was 22, has 4 kids. You're trying to go to school in, with those kinds of adult challenges, right? And a micro-credential can be really cool. And I got to tell you this, I found this thing that a student showed me. There's an organization called Penn Foster. You give them like $1,000 and they give you an online course in something like sterilizing medical office equipment. And if you look it up online, the starting salaries are somewhere between 40 and 50,000. And it puts you in the medical office where you can earn other certificates, right? And increase yourself. So this concept of micro-credentials, I'm really kind of smitten by that because it's a quick route to earn. So then you can relax a little bit and then figure out what you're going to do with your life. And finally, something that both of you really hit on in a big way is a growing concern for social and emotional development. What was it like during the pandemic, Natalie?
Yeah, I will say before I comment on that, I think before we can go into flipped learning, into micro-credentials, all of the, I think, different learning pedagogies that are coming out, I think it just goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning, with homeworks, is that you can't do any of that until Maslow's hierarchy is addressed. So until all of our scholars' basic kind of needs, social, emotional, kind of, all of that is addressed. Because if our scholars essentially can't learn, no human can learn until all of those things are they feel safe and seen and heard and valued, and again, basic physical needs are also addressed as well. So I just wanted to point that out. But yes, after that, those I think are really awesome new learning models that I think can, really help ignite a lot of scholars' interests in whatever field and passions that they want to go into. In terms of the pandemic, I think I'll just say, address this very quickly. Definitely saw huge challenges within just even our small cohort, and then within Trenton. But I think number one is mental health. Even our scholars, we're helping them, teaching them tools to become advocates for themselves, and they are already doing that at homework. So last year, our scholars came in, they were like, mental health is the biggest issue right now in our generation. We want more group therapy. So we got them more group therapy this year. But, I think that was, top of mind, number one. And second is learning loss. I think, our scholars just miss so much school. And so already there is such a gap within marginalized communities and, communities that were able to afford computers and accessibility, and schools that were able to have smaller ratios and work one-on-one with, different students and teachers. And I think we're really feeling that now. And so something that we're doing at homeworks is we have added, our scholars are not happy about this. They do study hall every day, but we're adding like half an hour more twice a week to really fill that kind of gap. And to make sure ultimately that they, not only have those fundamentals mastered, but that they're confident, as they navigate through the classroom and through the world.
Absolutely. And, I love all these things, but I see them as individual applications. Like what bothers me is when they come up with a new thing, and then suddenly that has to get sort of spread out over everybody. And just because it's a new thing doesn't mean it's as right for everybody as the old thing was right for everybody. They have to do it that way because the numbers are so huge. the government has to put an education system together that's cookie cutter because the numbers are so gigantic. It's the only way to manage it. But see, I think that's where we come in. That's where you provide the supports that you provide, and that's where I provide the alternative school for the kids who just are not going to go to school. I'm there for them. During the pandemic, though, Age Out Angels exploded. We got so big. I thought we were going to go out of business, and we got the other opposite happen. How was the pandemic in your world, April?
Well, personally, in the FCAA world, what we did was we found ourselves not having an off clock, right? We had to be on. So whether it was advocacy and trying to create and establish this new norm from the East Coast to the West Coast and the Midwest, everything in between. So we were starting our days in advocacy, and everybody wanted to get on calls and groups, and I know that's what everybody around. But with other organizations, what we did was we established on Sundays, which was a healing restorative group. And so everyone was trying to solve, like, how do you deal with being stuck at home? Where when we established this group, and it ran for quite a while, where Sundays we would just open up a Zoom, similar to what you're talking about for your Christmas, and get individuals to come chat. And the age range varied. What was important was that people weren't prescribed. There wasn't an agenda that said you had to come and here's what we're going to talk about and here's what we're going to accomplish. We were just coming together in space to connect. And for the young people that were still in college and were still in high school transitioning, it was trying to ensure that they had the technology, that they were providing or establishing safe places, right? Some young people were saying, how can I learn? And I'm in a group home, everybody's talking over each other, or I'm learning out of the bathroom so that I can be able to just listen and engage. And so what we did was we used our Sundays to provide a mental health space. And it allowed a safe space in order for people to be able to be ready for the work week. And we were like, okay, yet another Zoom, but people got real. So like I was cooking live Easter dinner or, Sunday dinners, and we would just have the conversations around it and hear about. Some of us were, like myself, I worked in an education system at that time. I was in schools. So I had to be at work every day. And there were other people that were immediate workers as well. So they had to show up to work. And so it was hard on them as well. And, it really was just seeing this whole change and shift. One of the most profound things that came out in that sessions was early on in one of our sessions, a young person said, the rest of the world is struggling to try to get and understand what it means to have this control taken away from you, when we've lived in this non-controlled world by being in care. So we know what it's like if we're in residential or we're in TLP, so this is normal for us. And we're actually probably the most calmest. That was the younger generation. What I did was we activated an older generation. So we got an older generation that got out and said, I thought these days were over with for me, of not having a sense of control, of going out and doing what I needed to do. And so that became our conversation, right? From one spectrum to the next of what did healing look like? People just think that once you've, gone through the child welfare system, you're good. There's nothing else that's needed. And that's not true. And that's what is important for educators to understand, that on top of everything, COVID or being in care, there's this multitude of what's happening for a young person to walk through a door or to show up on camera live. And what does it take for them emotionally to be there? And that's the biggest curve that we're still dealing with today in the programs, even with my day-to-day programs and my regular job. We work with the young people, is the aftermath of that social emotional time that was lost of connecting with people.
And how to get it back somehow, or try to. That's amazing.
What is that sense of normalcy, right? So you have this group of young people like myself, I'm 43, so I aged out of the system, over 20 years ago, but there's still this group of individuals who are still trying to fight for a sense of normalcy. And then you had this COVID that created this, again, uncertainty. but for some for a subset of group, it was normal for them to be abnormal.
Yes. Yes, it makes perfect sense. You two are amazing. I love you both. And the sadness I have right now is just that we're running out of time. And I do wanted to ruin the whole show with my final words tonight because I scared myself over Thanksgiving. I really did. And I'll tell you how I did it. See, I had always viewed the Holocaust as something sacred. You know, I'd always thought that there was no atrocity that could possibly compare to like the sheer numbers of the Holocaust. And when people made comparisons to the Holocaust, I would always just say, you know, that's just rude to all the people who actually suffered in the Holocaust, because you're not even close, you know. I mean, given the immense volume of selective hate where violence is normalized, how could you have a perfect storm like that ever, anywhere, anytime? What could compare, you know? Not slavery, not on that basis. I mean, slavery was equally catastrophic, but extermination wasn't the goal, okay? Extermination was the goal here, okay? So it was Thanksgiving, right? So I did a little research on Native Americans. Guess what I learned? When they started to settle, if you will, North America, and this is just North America, there were 5 million Native Americans living here. And like 100 years or so later, when the whole thing was over and it was considered settled, there were 218,000. That sure as hell sounds like a Holocaust to me, you know? And it taught me a lesson right in that moment that seems valuable somehow. So I thought I would share it with you. And it's just simply that, like, you don't have to be called a name that everyone knows, like Nazi, to be behind the extermination of a race. I mean, that's what was attempted here. I'm not excusing Hitler, but he didn't invent it. This has been done before. And all the violence that we're feeling, all the hate, all the separation that we're feeling, and I don't want to be political about it. I'd way rather be emotional about it. Because as I look around, I find that the number of people who want, like, you know, violence and war and things like that is really very minimal compared to the people who don't want violence and war. You know, the pacifists, if you want to call it that, you know, would outnumber the hawks, I don't know, 10 to 1, maybe 50 to 1, maybe 3,000 to 1. Because I walk around in all the circles that I travel in, different socioeconomic groups, people of different color. Nobody I know thinks war's a good thing. Yet, there's always somebody out there who wants to wage it, who wants to kill people because they're a color or because they're a religion or because you took my salad, whatever the reason. We are a human species with basically no predators except disease. And we got scientists who are pretty good with that. Remove the disease and we don't have a predator. We eat our dinner without looking over our shoulders to make sure a dinosaur isn't going to eat us. We don't have a predator. Our only predator is ourselves. And I wish that there could be a time where we could just give it a rest. That's all the time we have for tonight. I want to thank you for listening at home. Next week should be a very interesting show. Next week, we're going to have an organization here called Lunch Break. And Lunch Break is sort of one of those organizations that's trying to cover a lot of spaces. They're not in the education space, so don't worry, but they're in the feeding, housing, you know, taking care of those other gaps in the social program. So that should be really interesting next week. Do me a favor, put this on your calendars right now. Let's make a date to meet here, right here at about 6:15 next Monday. And we'll talk to the people from lunch break, and you'll hear some very, very interesting things. I want to thank our producer, Robin, our engineer, Ruben. Music provided by Mozart. I don't know why he works for us. He must need the money. Stay safe, everyone. And remember, it's only Monday. There's still plenty of time to make this week the best week ever. Good night, everyone.